Commander Zethkar of the Dominion fleet stood before the massive holographic display, his 6 eyes scanning the tactical readout with growing irritation. The blue-green planet below them spun lazily in the void, completely unaware of the armada that had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of their solar system. "Such a primitive world," sneered Admiral Vexton, her serpentine form coiling around the command chair. "Look at their pathetic defenses. A few orbital stations, some outdated missile platforms. They call this military preparation." Zitker's mandibles clicked in amusement. The Krillian Dominion had conquered 47 star systems in the past century. Each time, the inferior species had fallen within days, sometimes hours. This blue world, which the inhabitants called Earth, would be no different. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Kixoel from the communications station, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from the planet's surface. They appear to be attempting to establish contact." "Ignore them," Vexton commanded with a dismissive wave of her scaled hand. "We've studied their primitive languages. They'll likely beg for mercy or try to negotiate some pathetic surrender terms." Zethkar nodded, though something nagged at him about the intelligence reports. The humans had somehow managed to detect their approach while they were still 3 light-years out. Most species couldn't track Dominion stealth technology until they were practically on top of them. But the tactical computers had dismissed this as a statistical anomaly. The Dominion had spent months studying Earth from long-range observation posts. Humans were clearly a young species, having only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their weapons were crude chemical projectiles and primitive energy weapons. Their armor was laughably thin metal plates. By all calculations, they should surrender the moment they saw the Dominion fleet. "Initiating the standard intimidation protocol," announced Weapons Officer Drexmain, firing warning shots across their orbital installations. The massive dreadnought's main cannons erupted in brilliant blue light. The energy beams streaked across space, deliberately missing the human space stations by mere kilometers. It was a time-tested strategy that had worked on dozens of worlds. Show overwhelming force, demonstrate superior technology, and watch the enemy surrender without a fight. Instead of the expected panic transmissions begging for mercy, the human response was immediate and coordinated. Every orbital platform began launching missiles simultaneously. Not the expected handful of desperate shots, but thousands upon thousands of projectiles streaming toward the Dominion fleet like an angry swarm of insects. "What is this?" Vexton hissed, her scales shifting from their usual golden hue to an alarmed red. "Our intelligence indicated they had perhaps 200 orbital missiles total." Recalculating missile count, Kixoel reported, his voice rising with each update. 5,000, 8,000, 12,000 projectiles inbound. "Sir, they're not stopping. The launch rate is accelerating." Zethkar felt a cold chill run through his exoskeleton. In 47 previous conquests, no species had ever responded to intimidation with such massive retaliation. Most civilized races understood the futility of fighting a superior force. "Activate defensive systems," he ordered, trying to keep the uncertainty out of his voice. "How long until impact?" 14 minutes at current velocity, Drexmain replied, his 3 hands dancing across the weapons console. "Sir, preliminary scans indicate these aren't standard chemical explosive warheads. The energy signatures are unusual." The next few minutes passed in tense silence as the Dominion fleet prepared for the incoming barrage. Their defensive shields were rated to withstand direct hits from antimatter weapons. A few primitive human missiles would barely register as minor impacts. The first wave of projectiles struck the lead destroyer with a sound that reverberated through the hull like thunder. But instead of the expected minor damage reports, alarms began screaming throughout the bridge. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12, shouted the damage control officer. "We've lost primary shield generators on the port side." "That's impossible," Vexton snarled. "Our shields can withstand." Her words were cut off as another salvo struck home. This time, the impacts weren't just kinetic. Each missile seemed to carry multiple warheads that separated at the last second, striking different sections of the ship simultaneously. "Sir," Kixoel's voice cracked with panic. "I'm analyzing the warhead composition. These aren't conventional explosives. They're using some kind of programmable matter that reconfigures itself on impact to exploit weaknesses in our armor plating." Zethkar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The humans had somehow developed smart weapons that could adapt to their targets in real time. This was technology that the Dominion had only theoretical knowledge of, considered too complex for practical battlefield application. Return fire, he ordered. Target their orbital platforms. The Dominion's energy weapons lanced out toward the human installations. But as the beams approached their targets, something unexpected happened. The space around each platform shimmered, and the deadly energy bursts were deflected harmlessly into empty space. They have defensive screens, Drexmain reported in amazement. But the energy signatures don't match any known technology in our databases. Then, destroy them with concentrated fire. Vexton screamed. Pour everything we have into those platforms. For the next hour, the Dominion fleet unleashed a devastating barrage against the human orbital defenses. Massive energy beams, antimatter torpedoes, and gravitational distortion weapons filled the space between the fleets with deadly light. Any civilized species would have been vaporized within minutes. Instead, the human platforms began doing something that defied all military logic. They started moving. Not the slow, ponderous repositioning of normal space stations, but rapid, precise maneuvers that seemed to anticipate exactly where each Dominion weapon would strike. How are they doing this? Zitkar demanded. Those platforms are massive structures. They shouldn't be able to maneuver like fighter craft. Sir, Kixwell replied, his voice filled with growing dread. I think they're not moving the platforms themselves. They're moving space around the platforms. Somehow, they've weaponized gravitational manipulation. The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. Gravitational technology was considered the pinnacle of advanced civilizations. The Dominion had been working on theoretical applications for centuries without success. Yet these primitive humans were using it as a standard defensive system. Admiral, came a transmission from the destroyer Talon's Edge. We're reading massive energy buildups on the planet's surface. Multiple locations showing power generation levels that exceed our entire fleet's output. Vexton scales had now shifted to a pale, sickly yellow. That's not possible. Our long-range surveys indicated they were still using primitive fusion reactors. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our database, the destroyer's captain continued. Whatever they're powering up down there, it's drawing energy from everywhere. Solar radiation, cosmic background radiation, even zero-point vacuum fluctuations. Zethkar realized with growing horror that their intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. The humans weren't primitive at all. They were deliberately concealing their true capabilities, making themselves appear weak while secretly developing weapons that made the Dominion's arsenal look like toys. Sir, Kixoel suddenly exclaimed, I'm receiving a transmission from the planet. It's coming through on channels we didn't even know existed. They're bypassing our communication encryption entirely. Put it through, Zethkar ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. The holographic display flickered, and the image of a human appeared. It was an elderly female with gray hair and surprisingly calm eyes. Behind her, Zethkar could see what appeared to be an advanced command center filled with technology he didn't recognize. I am Secretary General Chun of the United Earth Defense Council. The human said in perfect Krillian, despite the fact that their species had supposedly never made contact before. I believe you wish to establish communications. How do you know our language? Vexton demanded. We've been monitoring your activities for quite some time. Chun replied with what humans called a smile. Your conquest of the Zephyrian system was particularly instructive. Though I must say, your treatment of civilian populations was deeply disappointing. Zethkar felt his blood turn to ice. The Zephyrian conquest had been completed 8 months ago, nearly 20 light-years from Earth. There was no way the humans could have observed it unless they possessed faster-than-light communication technology far beyond anything the Dominion had achieved. We demand your immediate surrender, he managed to say, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. I'm afraid that's not possible, Chun replied politely. However, I am authorized to offer you one final chance to withdraw from our system peacefully. You have 10 minutes to begin your departure. After that, we will be forced to defend ourselves. This is ridiculous. Vexton shrieked. We have 500 warships. You have a few orbital platforms, and some modified missiles. Secretary General, another voice interrupted from off-screen. They've targeted our lunar installations with their main guns. Chen's expression hardened. I see. In that case, I think a demonstration is in order. Admiral Zethkar, I want you to observe your fourth destroyer very carefully. The transmission ended, leaving the Dominion bridge in stunned silence. Zethkar immediately pulled up the tactical display, showing the position of the fourth destroyer, Screaming Vengeance, currently positioned 200,000 kilometers from Earth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, space itself seemed to fold around the destroyer. The massive warship, over 2 kilometers long and armed with enough firepower to level a continent, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but erased as if it had never been there at all. What happened to the Screaming Vengeance? Drexmain whispered. I don't know, Kixuel replied, his hands shaking as he worked his console. According to our sensors, it was never there. All records of its existence have been wiped from our databases. Even the crew roster shows that ship was never built. That's impossible, Vexton said, but her voice had lost all its earlier arrogance. You can't just erase something from reality. Apparently, Zethkar said grimly, humans can. The communications system crackled to life again, and Secretary General Chun reappeared. I apologize for the dramatic demonstration, but some lessons can only be learned through direct experience. Your destroyer was not destroyed. It was simply relocated to a dimension where it never existed in this universe. The crew is unharmed, though they are having some difficulty adjusting to their new reality. This is not possible, Zethkar said, more to himself than to the human. Your species makes the same mistake that many aggressive civilizations make, Chen explained patiently. You assume that more advanced means more violent, that superior technology exists primarily to create bigger weapons. Humanity learned long ago that the most powerful force in the universe is not destruction, but creation. You're bluffing, Vexton snarled. If you had such power, you would have used it to conquer other worlds yourselves. Why would we want to conquer other worlds? Chen asked, seeming genuinely puzzled. We have everything we need right here. Besides, conquest requires taking things from others. We prefer to make things ourselves. The next words from a human chilled Zethkar to his core. We know about all 47 worlds you've conquered. We know about the billions you've enslaved or killed. We know about the Dominion's plans to strip mine the galaxy for resources to feed your ever-expanding empire. And we know that you've ignored every warning, every attempt at peaceful contact, every offer of friendship that other species have extended to you. How could you possibly know? Zethkar began. Because we've been trying to warn you for the past 50 years, Chen interrupted. We've sent diplomatic missions that you've destroyed without even reading their messages. We've left gifts of advanced technology in your path that you've used only to build bigger weapons. We've even tried communicating through species you've conquered, hoping they could convince you to change your ways. The human woman's expression grew sad. Every time, you've chosen violence. Every time, you've assumed that might makes right. And now, you've finally encountered a species that has the ability to stop you permanently. You're threatening us, Zethkar said. No, Chen replied. I'm warning you, just as we've been trying to warn you for decades. The difference is, this time you don't have the option to ignore the warning. The transmission ended, leaving the Dominion fleet in complete silence. Outside the viewports, Earth continued its peaceful rotation, looking for all the world like a helpless blue marble floating in the vast darkness of space. But Zethkar now understood that appearances could be devastatingly deceptive. The emergency council session aboard the flagship Dominion's Wrath was unlike anything in the fleet's history. Representatives from every major ship crowded into the massive conference chamber, their various alien forms creating a cacophony of nervous sounds. Chittering, hissing, clicking, and other untranslatable expressions of fear filled the air. Admiral Vexton slithered to the center of the room, her scales still pale with shock. The situation is unprecedented, she began, her voice echoing through the chamber's translation systems. In 3 centuries of Dominion expansion, we have never encountered resistance of this magnitude. Captain Norex of the Dreadnought Inevitable Victory raised one of his 4 arms. With respect, Admiral, one missing destroyer doesn't constitute significant resistance. Perhaps we witnessed some kind of holographic deception. Then, explain the sensor data, Commander Zethkar replied grimly. He activated the central display, showing the readings from the moment the screaming vengeance vanished. Every detection system on every ship registered the same thing. The destroyer didn't explode, didn't implode, didn't get torn apart by weapons fire. It simply stopped existing. The assembled officers studied the data in uncomfortable silence. The readings showed a perfectly normal Dominion destroyer 1 nanosecond, and empty space the next. No energy discharge, no debris field, no gravitic disturbance that would indicate matter displacement. Just nothing. Perhaps their technology creates some kind of stealth field, suggested Captain Moradek of the cruiser's Swift Retribution. The ship could be hidden rather than destroyed. We've run every conceivable scan, Zethkar replied. Deep space radar, quantum resonance detection, even psionic probes. There's no trace of the ship anywhere in this system. According to our computers, it never existed. Fleet engineer Kexanel, a massive arthropod whose species specialized in technological analysis, spoke up from her position near the data terminals. I've been analyzing the energy patterns from the human orbital platforms. Their technology operates on principles our scientists consider theoretically impossible. She activated a secondary display showing complex energy readings. They're manipulating probability itself, not just bending space-time, but actually altering the mathematical likelihood of events occurring. The missiles that struck our ships weren't just smart weapons. They were weapons that rewrote the laws of physics around themselves to guarantee successful hits. That's absurd, the Orcs protested. Physics doesn't work that way. Physics as we understand it doesn't work that way, Kexanael corrected. But these humans appear to have discovered ways to operate outside our understanding of natural law. Every weapon they've used, every defensive system they've deployed, functions by changing what is possible rather than just applying force. Admiral Vexton coiled tighter around herself, a sign of extreme agitation among her species. What are you suggesting? That there's some kind of gods? Not gods, Kexanael replied, but possibly something more dangerous. A species that has learned to manipulate reality at the fundamental level. Our weapons can destroy matter and energy. Their weapons can apparently destroy concepts and possibilities. Commander Yixvar of the stealth corvette Shadow's Edge spoke from the chamber's periphery. We should consider the possibility that this is all elaborate misdirection. No species develops such advanced technology without leaving traces of their development. Yet our long-range surveillance showed primitive humans using chemical rockets just decades ago. That's exactly what troubles me, Zethkar admitted. How does a species go from chemical propulsion to reality manipulation in such a short time? It's not natural technological development. Unless, Kexanael said slowly, they've been hiding their true capabilities from the beginning. Think about it. What if everything we observed was deliberately staged to make them appear primitive? What if their chemical rockets were actually reality manipulation devices disguised as crude technology? The implications of this statement sent ripples of fear through the assembled officers. If the humans had been capable of such deception, it meant their intelligence-gathering capabilities far exceeded anything the Dominion possessed. Sir, Lieutenant Kixoel's voice came through the chamber's communication system. We're receiving another transmission from a planet. Put it through, Vexton ordered. Secretary General Chun appeared on the main display, still maintaining her calm demeanor. Behind her, the Advanced Command Center bustled with activity as humans in strange uniforms monitored incomprehensible displays. Good afternoon, Chun said pleasantly. I trust you've had time to discuss your situation. What do you want? Vexton demanded. The same thing we've wanted for 50 years, Chun replied. To prevent unnecessary loss of life. Your fleet represents millions of sentient beings from dozens of conquered worlds. We have no desire to harm them. Then, you'll allow us to withdraw? Zethkar asked. Of course. We've prepared detailed navigation charts that will guide you safely out of our system and back to your nearest base. However, there are conditions. The human woman's expression grew more serious. The Dominion's expansion ends here. You will return the worlds you've conquered to their original inhabitants. You'll compensate the species you've harmed. And you will submit to oversight by the Galactic Ethics Council. What Galactic Ethics Council? The Orcs demanded. No such organization exists. It does now, Chun replied matter-of-factly. We established it this morning in consultation with representatives from all 47 worlds you've conquered. They were quite eager to participate. Zethkar felt another chill run through his exoskeleton. How did you contact those worlds? They're scattered across hundreds of light years. Distance is only a limitation if you think of space-time as fixed, Chen explained. Once you understand that reality is more malleable than most species assume, communication becomes quite simple. Captain Moradek leaned forward aggressively. You're asking us to surrender everything we've built. Our entire civilization depends on the resources from those worlds. No, Chen Kedektiv. Your civilization depends on taking things from others. We're offering to teach you how to make things for yourselves. Sustainable energy generation, matter synthesis, even controlled reality manipulation. Humanity is willing to share these technologies freely. In exchange for what? Vextun asked suspiciously. Nothing, Chen replied. We don't need anything from you. We're offering these gifts because helping others grow and prosper is what advanced civilizations do. The conference chamber erupted in confused chatter as the various officers tried to process this concept. In Dominion culture, advanced technology was a tool for conquest. The idea of sharing it freely was almost incomprehensible. You're lying, the Orcs declared. No species gives away their advantages without expecting something in return. That's true of species that view existence as a zero-sum competition, Chen acknowledged. But reality isn't zero-sum. When you can manipulate probability and possibility, scarcity becomes a choice rather than a natural law. Prove it, Vextun challenged. Chen smiled. Very well. Please scan your cargo bays. Confused murmurs filled the chamber as officers contacted their ships. Within moments, reports began flooding in that left everyone speechless. Admiral, came the voice of the inevitable Victory's cargo officer. Our holds are filled with devices we don't recognize. The manifest shows they appeared approximately 3 minutes ago. Similar reports came from every ship in the fleet. Somehow, the humans had teleported unknown technology directly into the most secure areas of every Dominion vessel simultaneously. Don't be alarmed, Chen said. The devices are gifts. Compact fusion generators that can power entire cities, matter replicators that can create any element you need, even small reality stabilizers that will help your scientists understand how we accomplish these effects. This is impossible, Kexanael whispered, studying the readings from her own ship. Our cargo bays are protected by quantum locks, temporal barriers, even probability screens. Nothing should be able to materialize inside them. Those protections are based on the assumption that intruders exist within the same reality framework as your ships, Chen explained. We simply borrowed your cargo bays temporarily, placed the gifts inside, then returned them to your reality. From your perspective, the items appeared instantly. From ours, we had all the time we needed. The technological implications were staggering. If humans could manipulate reality at will, they could essentially do anything. Teleport fleets across galactic distances instantly, provide infinite resources, even rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas. Why? Zethkar asked, his voice barely audible. Why offer us such power? Why not simply eliminate us as a threat? Chen's expression grew sad. Because elimination doesn't solve anything. You would simply be replaced by another aggressive species, and the cycle would continue. True peace comes from understanding, not domination. But we've conquered 47 worlds, Vextun protested. We've enslaved billions. We've destroyed entire civilizations. Yes, Chen acknowledged. And that pain cannot be undone. But it can be learned from. The species you've harmed have agreed to accept reparations and oversight rather than revenge. They understand that ending the cycle of violence requires forgiveness as well as justice. Admiral Vextun's scales began shifting through a complex pattern of colors that indicated deep internal conflict. What you're proposing, it would mean admitting that everything the Dominion has done for centuries was wrong. Not wrong, Chen corrected gently. Unnecessary. Your species developed conquest as a survival strategy because you believed resources were finite and must be competed for. We're showing you that resources can be infinite if you know how to create them. And if we refuse your offer? The Orcs asked. Chen's expression hardened slightly. Then, you become a threat that must be contained. We will not allow the suffering you've caused to spread to other species. You'll destroy us? No, Chen replied. We'll relocate you. There are infinite realities where your fleet can exist without harming others. Realities where you're the only sentient species, where you can conquer and expand to your heart's content without causing suffering to others. The implied threat was clear. The humans could simply erase the Dominion from this reality as easily as they had erased the Destroyer. Not death, but exile to a universe where their aggressive nature couldn't harm anyone else. How long do we have to decide? Zethkar asked. Take as long as you need, Shin replied. Time is another resource that becomes unlimited once you understand how to manipulate it properly. When you're ready to give us your answer, simply think it clearly and we'll know. The transmission ended, leaving the Dominion's military leadership to contemplate the most important decision in their species' history. Around them, displays showed readings from the mysterious devices that had appeared in their cargo holds, technology that could revolutionize their civilization or doom it, depending on their choice. Outside the viewports, Earth continued its peaceful rotation, a small blue world that had just offered to reshape the destiny of half the galaxy. Whether that offer would be accepted or rejected remained to be seen, but one thing was certain. The age of Dominion expansion was over. The debate had been raging for 6 hours aboard the Dominion flagship, and Commander Zethkar was beginning to realize that his species might be fundamentally incapable of making the choice the humans had offered them. Every few minutes, the discussion would circle back to the same core problem. How could a civilization built on conquest and domination simply abandon everything that defined its existence? The humans are offering us technology that would make us gods, Captain Orcs argued for the dozenth time. Reality manipulation, infinite resources, the ability to reshape existence itself. We'd be fools to refuse. And what would we become? Counter-argued Commander Yixvar. A client species dependent on human charity? Our entire culture, our history, our achievements, all reduced to nothing more than a failed experiment they chose to salvage. Admiral Vexton had remained largely silent throughout the debate, her scales cycling through colors that indicated deep contemplation. Finally, she spoke. What troubles me most is not what they're offering, but how easily they offered it. The technology to manipulate reality itself, handed over without reservation to a species they know to be violent and aggressive. Fleet engineer Kexanel looked up from her analysis console, where she had been studying the devices that had appeared in their cargo holds. Admiral, I've been examining the human gifts, and I believe I understand why they're so confident in offering them to us. She activated the main display, showing a complex schematic that hurt to look at directly. The geometric patterns seemed to shift and flow in ways that defied three-dimensional logic. These devices aren't just technology, Kexanael explained. They're teaching tools. Each one contains what I can only describe as compressed knowledge. When activated, they don't just provide power or manufacture materials. They gradually educate the user in the principles behind their operation. So, they're trying to change us, Thorex said with suspicion. Reprogram our thinking. Not reprogram, Kexanael corrected. Expand. The knowledge isn't forced into our minds. It's offered. We can accept as much or as little as we choose. But the more we understand, the more we begin to see the universe the way humans do. And how do humans see the universe? Zethkar asked. As infinite, Kexanael replied simply. They don't view existence as a competition for limited resources because they understand that limitations are just problems waiting to be solved. They don't see other species as threats because they know that cooperation creates more value than conquest. Commander Yixvar's stealth-adapted features rippled with discomfort. That kind of thinking would destroy everything that makes us Dominion. Our strength comes from our willingness to take what we need, to dominate those who would deny us resources. Our strength comes from our unity and determination, Zethkar corrected. Those traits don't have to be channeled into conquest. Before anyone could respond, Lieutenant Kixoel's voice echoed through the chamber. Sirs, we're receiving multiple transmissions. Not from Earth, but from everywhere. Clarify, Admiral Vexton ordered. The signals are coming from all 47 worlds we've conquered, Kixoel replied, his voice filled with confusion. But also from species we've never encountered, from sectors we've never explored, even from what appear to be other galaxies. Put them through, Vexton commanded. The main display flickered and divided into dozens of smaller screens, each showing a different alien species. Some were familiar, conquered peoples that the Dominion had enslaved or displaced. Others were completely unknown, with physiologies that range from crystalline formations to energy beings to creatures that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. But all of them were speaking in perfect Dominion standard language. "Greetings, Krillian Dominion," said a being that appeared to be made of living starlight. "We are the Confederation of Cooperative Species, recently established under human guidance. We understand you face a choice regarding your future. We wanted you to hear from those who have faced similar decisions," added a creature that looked like a walking tree, its bark-like skin covered in bioluminescent patterns. "I'm Speaker Rootsong of the Verdani Collective. 2 centuries ago, my people were much like yours, aggressive, territorial, convinced that survival required the subjugation of others." "What changed?" Zethkar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Humanity found us," Rootsong replied. "Not as conquerors, but as teachers. They showed us that the universe we thought was empty and hostile was actually teeming with potential allies, all struggling with the same false assumptions about scarcity and competition." Another voice joined the conversation, this one from a crystalline being whose faceted body reflected light in impossible ways. "I am Harmony of Angles, representing the Silicon Consensus. When humans first contacted us, we were certain they intended to harvest our mineral-rich worlds. Instead, they taught us to synthesize any element we needed from quantum vacuum fluctuations. The pattern is always the same, the starlight being added. Aggressive species develop conquest strategies because they believe they must compete for limited resources. Humans help them understand that resources become unlimited once you learn to create rather than take." Commander Yixvar's scales bristled with suspicion. "This sounds like a coordinated propaganda effort. How do we know these species weren't simply brainwashed or replaced with human puppets?" The response came from an unexpected source. One of the screens showed a group of Krillians identical to those aboard the Dominion fleet. "Because we asked the same question," said the lead figure, whose markings identified him as a commander of the old Krillian exploration force. "I am Jethkar of the independent Krillian Republic. 40 years ago, my fleet encountered humans during our expansion into the Rigel sector." Zethkar started in shock. The independent Krillian Republic had been thought extinct for decades, destroyed in some distant catastrophe. Yet here was clear evidence that at least some Krillians had survived. "We chose aggression," Jethkar continued. "We attacked without warning, convinced that these soft-looking beings would be easy prey. The humans defended themselves, but even in the midst of battle, they kept trying to communicate, to offer alternatives to conflict." "What happened?" Admiral Vexton asked. "We lost," Jethkar admitted. "But instead of destroying us or enslaving us as we would have done, the humans rebuilt our damaged ships. They provided medical care for our wounded. They even upgraded our technology while explaining how their improvements worked. And you just accepted this?" the Orcs demanded. "Not immediately," Jethkar replied. "We assumed it was some kind of trap, a way to make us dependent, so they could control us later. But months passed, then years, and the promised betrayal never came. Instead, they kept teaching us, kept helping us, kept treating us as equals despite our initial hostility. Eventually, Jethkar said, his voice growing thoughtful, we began to understand that their behavior wasn't a strategy. It was simply who they were. They helped us because helping others was what they considered natural and right." Rootsong spoke again. "The humans have a saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. They believe that by helping everyone grow and prosper, they create a universe that is safer and more interesting for themselves as well. But surely they must want something in return," Yixvar insisted. "Some form of tribute, some acknowledgement of superiority, some strategic advantage. They do want something," Harmony of Angles confirmed. "They want us to succeed. They want us to grow beyond our limitations. They want us to become the best versions of ourselves possible." "Why?" Zethkar asked. "Because," said the Starlight being, "they understand that consciousness is the universe's way of understanding itself. Every thinking species that reaches its full potential adds to the sum total of knowledge and wisdom available to all. The humans don't see us as competitors. They see us as collaborators in the greatest project ever undertaken. What project? Admiral Vexton asked. The transformation of a universe from a place of scarcity and conflict into a place of abundance and cooperation, Rootsong replied. The humans call it the Great Work, the gradual evolution of reality itself toward greater harmony and understanding. Kexanel looked up from her console with wide eyes. Admiral, I've been analyzing the quantum signatures of these transmissions. They're not just coming from those worlds. They're coming from those worlds across multiple timelines simultaneously. The humans aren't just showing us species that accepted their offer. They're showing us the outcomes of every possible choice. You mean they've already seen how this ends? Zethkar asked. Not seen, corrected Secretary General Chun as she appeared on a new screen. Calculated. When you can manipulate probability, you can examine the likely outcomes of any decision before it's made. We know what happens if you accept our offer, what happens if you refuse, even what happens if you try to find a middle ground. Then, why go through this charade? Thorex demanded. Why not just force the outcome you prefer? Because choice matters, Chen replied. Growth that is imposed from outside isn't real growth. You have to choose to become better. Otherwise, you're just our puppets, and that serves no one. What if we choose badly? Admiral Vexton asked. Then, you choose badly, Chen said simply. And you live with the consequences. Or rather, you exist with the consequences in whatever reality becomes necessary to contain those choices. But you hope we'll choose to join your great work, Zethkar asked. We hope you'll choose to become who you have the potential to be, Chen replied. A species that uses its strength to build rather than destroy. A civilization that explores the universe to discover wonders rather than to claim territory. The transmission screens showing the various alien species began to flicker and fade, but their final words echoed clearly through the chamber. The choice is yours, they said in unison. But know that whatever you decide, the universe will continue to grow toward greater understanding. The only question is whether you will be part of that growth or isolated from it. As the last transmission ended, the Dominion leadership sat in silence, contemplating a decision that would determine not just their fate, but the fate of every species they had conquered and every world they had claimed. Outside the viewports, Earth continued its peaceful rotation, waiting patiently for an answer that would reshape the galaxy. The emergency klaxons aboard the Dominion flagship began wailing at exactly 0347-hour ship time, jolting Commander Zethkar from his uneasy sleep. He had been dreaming of impossible geometries and voices speaking in languages that bypassed his ears entirely, a side effect of proximity to the human gift devices that seemed to grow stronger the longer they remained aboard. All senior officers to the bridge immediately. Admiral Vexton's voice echoed through the ship's corridors. Priority Alpha, emergency. Zethkar arrived on the bridge to find chaos. Officers stood clustered around displays, showing readings that made no sense, their voices raised in confused argument. Through the massive viewports, the space around Earth looked different somehow, though he couldn't immediately identify what had changed. Report, he ordered as he took his position. Sir, Lieutenant Kixwell said, his voice barely controlled. Approximately 6 minutes ago, our long-range sensors detected massive fleet movements throughout Dominion space. Every conquered world, every military installation, every patrol ship, they're all converging on a single location. Where? Admiral Vexton demanded as she slithered onto the bridge. Here, Fleet Engineer Kexal replied grimly. Every Dominion asset in the galaxy is moving toward Earth. Not through hyperspace, not through jump gates, but through, I don't know what to call it. They're just appearing in this system. Zethkar studied the tactical display with growing horror. Red dots, representing Dominion vessels, were materializing throughout the solar system at an alarming rate. Hundreds of ships were becoming thousands, thousands becoming tens of thousands. This is impossible, he said. It would take months for fleets from our most distant holdings to reach this system. They can't all just, Sir, Kixoel interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the super dreadnought, Eternal Dominance. Fleet Admiral Korthax is demanding to speak with you immediately. The main display flickered to life, showing the familiar form of Fleet Admiral Korthax, Supreme Commander of all Dominion military forces. Behind him, the bridge of the Eternal Dominance buzzed with activity as officers worked frantically at their stations. Zethkar, Korthax growled, explain to me how my flagship has suddenly appeared in orbit around an unknown planet, 20,000 light-years from where we were patrolling the Gamma frontier. Admiral, Zethkar began, the situation is complex. Complex. Korthax's voice rose to a roar. My entire fleet was transported across the galaxy in an instant. Our navigational computers insist we never left our patrol route, but every sensor shows we're in a completely different star system. I want explanations, Commander, and I want them now. Before Zethkar could respond, additional communication channels opened. Every screen on the bridge lit up with the faces of confused and angry Dominion commanders from across the galaxy, all demanding answers to the same impossible question. How had they suddenly found themselves in orbit around Earth? Admirals, commanders. Admiral Vexton spoke with as much authority as she could muster. What you're experiencing is the result of our negotiations with the indigenous species of this system. Negotiations? Admiral Gextar of the 2nd Battle Group snarled from his screen. What kind of negotiations result in the spontaneous transportation of entire fleets? The kind came a new voice where one side has the ability to manipulate space-time at will. Secretary General Chun appeared on every screen simultaneously, somehow inserting her transmission into their secured military channels without any apparent effort. The background behind her had changed. Instead of the Advanced Command Center, she now stood in what appeared to be a vast chamber filled with swirling energy and impossible architecture. Greetings to all Dominion forces, Chen said calmly. I apologize for the rather dramatic summoning, but we felt it was time to address your entire military leadership directly. You did this, Fleet Admiral Korthax demanded. You transported my fleets across the galaxy. Distance is merely a perspective issue once you understand the true nature of space-time, Chen replied. Your ships are exactly where they need to be for this conversation. Return us to our patrol routes immediately. Admiral Gextar shouted. That depends entirely on the outcome of our discussion, Chen said. You see, while Commander Zethkar and his officers have been considering our offer, we've been monitoring the rest of your empire. What we've observed is troubling. The display changed, showing surveillance footage from various Dominion-controlled worlds. The images were horrifying. Forced labor camps, strip mining operations that had reduced entire planets to barren wastelands, and systematic extermination programs targeting species that had resisted conquest. In just the past 6 hours, Chun continued, your forces have destroyed 3 civilian settlements, initiated strip mining operations on 2 more worlds, and begun the systematic execution of prisoners on 7 different planets. This behavior cannot be allowed to continue. Fleet Admiral Korthax's expression grew dangerous. You dare to lecture us on our own internal affairs? We are the Krillian Dominion. We have conquered half this galaxy through strength and determination. We will not be dictated to by some primitive species that hasn't even developed proper space travel. Admiral, Chen said gently, you're standing in a fleet of over 50,000 warships that we transported instantly across 20,000 light-years. In what sense exactly are we primitive? The question hung in the air as the various Dominion commanders began to realize the implications of their situation. If humans could move entire fleets across galactic distances at will, what else were they capable of? What do you want? Korthax asked, his voice now much more cautious. The same thing we've wanted all along, Chen replied. An end to the unnecessary suffering your expansion has caused. We've made a generous offer to your advanced fleet here at Earth. We're extending the same offer to all of you. What offer? Admiral Gextar demanded. Chen's image split, and suddenly, Zethkar found himself facing not just his supreme commander, but every major Dominion military leader simultaneously. The weight of their attention was crushing. Tell them, Commander, Chun said. Zethkar felt every eye upon him as he struggled to find words that would make the incomprehensible situation clear to his superiors. The humans, they've offered to share their technology with us. Reality manipulation, infinite resource generation, faster than light communication. In exchange, we would end our expansion campaigns and return conquered worlds to their original inhabitants. The response was immediate and overwhelmingly negative. Shouts of outrage, accusations of cowardice, and demand for immediate attack filled the communication channels. Fleet Admiral Korthax's voice cut through the chaos. You seriously expect the Dominion to surrender everything we've built because some upstart species makes threats? They're not threats, Admiral Vexton interjected. Watch this. She activated a recording of the Screaming Vengeance's disappearance, followed by the appearance of the gift devices in their cargo holds. The various fleet commanders watched in stunned silence as the evidence of human capabilities played out before them. They erased an entire destroyer from reality, Vexton explained. Not destroyed it, not disintegrated it, but made it so that it never existed in the first place. Then, they teleported advanced technology directly into our most secure compartments without triggering any of our detection systems. Impossible, Admiral Gextar protested, but his voice lacked conviction. No, Chun said, reappearing on the screens. Just improbable by your current understanding of physics. Admiral Korthax, you're a military strategist. Analyze the tactical situation objectively. We have demonstrated the ability to move your entire fleet against your will, to erase your ships from existence, and to bypass your most advanced security systems. If we were your enemies, how long would your civilization survive? Korthax was silent for long moments, his military mind clearly working through the implications. Finally, he spoke. What assurance do we have that you won't simply eliminate us once we surrender our military advantages? None, Chin replied honestly. Except for our actions. We could have destroyed your fleets the moment they arrived in this system. Instead, we're talking. We could have eliminated your homeworld years ago when we first became aware of your expansion. Instead, we try to warn you. We could force you to comply with our demands. Instead, we're offering you a choice. Some choice, Admiral Gextar sneered. Submit or be eliminated. Not eliminated, Chun corrected. Relocated. There are infinite realities where aggressive species can expand and conquer without harming others. We're prepared to move your entire civilization to such a reality if necessary. You're talking about exile, Fleet Admiral Korthax said. We're talking about consequences, Chun replied. Actions have results. A species that chooses to cause suffering will find itself in a reality where that choice doesn't harm innocent others. Suddenly, alarms began sounding on every Dominion ship simultaneously. The tactical displays lit up with new contacts. Not more Dominion vessels, but something else entirely. What are those? Commander Yixvar demanded. The answer came from Secretary General Chun. Representatives of every species you've conquered, displaced, or harmed over the past 3 centuries. They asked to be present for your decision. The space around Earth began filling with ships of every conceivable design. Crystalline vessels that seemed to sing as they moved, organic ships that pulsed like living hearts, energy beings that existed as pure light, and countless other forms that defied easy categorization. There are millions of them, Lieutenant Kixoel whispered. 3,417,862,614 vessels, Chun corrected precisely, representing every civilization that has been impacted by Dominion expansion. They're here to witness your choice and to participate in whatever future you select. Fleet Admiral Korthax stared at the overwhelming display of Allied forces surrounding his fleets. Even the mighty Dominion Armada looked insignificant compared to the vast gathering of ships that now filled the solar system. This is what you call cooperation? He asked. This is what happens when you stop viewing other species as enemies or resources, Chun replied. When you start seeing them as potential allies and friends. Every ship out there represents a civilization that chose growth over conquest, creation over destruction. And if we refuse your offer, then you join them anyway, Chin said simply. Just not in this reality. We'll relocate your entire civilization to a dimension where you can expand and conquer to your heart's content without affecting anyone else. That's not really a choice, Korthax observed. No, Chin agreed. The choice was made long ago when your species decided that might makes right. What you're experiencing now is simply the consequence of that choice finally, meeting a civilization that's stronger than you are. But we're offering you the chance to make a different choice going forward, Chun continued. To become part of something larger and more wonderful than conquest. To discover what your species is truly capable of when you stop limiting yourselves to taking things from others. The communication channels fell silent as the Dominion leadership contemplated the most important decision in their species' history. Around them, the gathering of Allied ships waited patiently for an answer that would determine the fate of half the galaxy. The debate among the Dominion leadership had stretched for 18 hours, with Fleet Admiral Corthax maintaining rigid control over what had become increasingly desperate arguments. Some commanders advocated for immediate surrender, others for a final desperate assault, and still others for attempting to negotiate some middle ground. But as the hours passed, it became increasingly clear that the humans weren't bluffing about any of their capabilities. Long-range sensors confirmed that every Dominion installation throughout the galaxy had been quietly surrounded by the same cooperative species now gathering around Earth. Not threatened, not attacked, but simply watched. They've effectively placed our entire civilization under house arrest, Admiral Gextar observed grimly. We can't move, can't escape, can't even communicate with our home worlds without their permission. Commander Zethkar studied the latest tactical reports from his bridge station. Actually, sir, they haven't restricted our communications at all. We're receiving updates from every Dominion facility. The watching ships aren't interfering with our operations in any way. Then what are they doing? Fleet Admiral Corthax demanded. Waiting, Admiral Vexton replied, her scales showing patterns of reluctant understanding. They're demonstrating that they could destroy us at any moment, but they're choosing not to. They want us to understand that our survival depends entirely on their restraint. Lieutenant Kixoel looked up from his communication station with a puzzled expression. Sirs, I'm receiving reports from our conquered worlds that are unusual. Explain, Corthax ordered. The watching ships have begun providing humanitarian aid to the populations we've been managing. Medical supplies, food, advanced technology. But they're not interfering with our administrative personnel or military installations. They're helping our slaves while ignoring our soldiers? Admiral Gextar asked incredulously. It appears so, sir. They seem to be drawing a distinction between our military forces and the civilian populations we control. Fleet Admiral Corthax was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. Finally, he spoke directly to the communications array. Secretary General Chun, I assume you're monitoring our discussions. Chen's image appeared immediately on the main display, her expression calm, but attentive. Of course, Admiral. Have you reached a decision? I'm trying to understand your strategy, Corthax replied. You've surrounded our entire civilization with overwhelming force, but you're providing aid to our conquered populations. What are you trying to achieve? We're demonstrating the difference between justice and revenge, Chen explained. Your military forces made the choice to engage in conquest and oppression. The civilians you rule had no choice in the matter. We see no reason to punish them for your decisions. But you're willing to punish us? We're willing to contain you, Chen corrected. There's a difference. Punishment is about retribution for past actions. Containment is about preventing future harm. Commander Yixvar leaned forward with interest. What happens to our people if we refuse your offer? Nothing, Chen replied. We relocate your military and political leadership to a reality where you can continue your expansion without harming others. Your civilian population remains in this reality and receives whatever support they need to build their own civilization. You'd split our species? Fleet Admiral Corthax asked, his voice showing the first real emotion since the crisis began. Only the part that chooses to continue causing harm, Chen said. Think of it as selective exile. Those who want to grow beyond conquest remain and become part of the greater galactic community. Those who can't let go of domination get their own universe to play with. Admiral Vexton's scales shifted to colors indicating deep thought. What about redemption? Is there no possibility for those who have caused harm to make amends? Of course there is, Chen replied, her expression brightening. Redemption is one of the most powerful forces in a universe. But it requires genuine recognition of harm caused and sincere commitment to change. We can teach your people how to repair the damage you've done, how to heal the wounds you've created, but only if they truly want to change. Fleet Engineer Kexanael spoke up from her analysis station. Secretary General, I've been studying the devices you provided. The more I understand them, the more I realize that your technology isn't just about manipulating reality. It's about understanding the fundamental interconnectedness of all things. Very good, Chen said with approval. You're beginning to grasp the deeper principles. Reality manipulation is just the surface level. The real power comes from understanding that every action ripples through the fabric of existence, affecting everything else in ways we can barely perceive. That's why conquest is ultimately self-defeating, Kexanael continued, her voice filled with growing realization. When you harm others, you're actually harming the cosmic system you're part of. The damage always comes back to affect the aggressor eventually. Exactly, Chen confirmed. Aggressive species always destroy themselves in the end because they're fighting against the fundamental structure of reality itself. We're offering to help you align with that structure instead of fighting it. Fleet Admiral Korthax was quiet for a long time, his military mind clearly working through implications and possibilities. Finally, he spoke. If we accept your offer, what guarantees do we have that you won't simply eliminate us once we've disarmed? The same guarantee that every other species in this gathering has, Chen replied, gesturing toward the vast fleet of alien vessels surrounding them. None of them were forced to accept our help. Each chose cooperation over conquest because they discovered it led to better outcomes for their people. Show him, came a new voice as one of the alien ships opened a communication channel. The speaker was clearly Krillian, one of their own species, but wearing unfamiliar insignia. I am Admiral Zexandra of the Krillian Cooperative, the figure said. 40 years ago, I made the same choice you're facing now. My fleet had been raiding human shipping lanes for months, convinced we could take whatever technology we wanted by force. What happened? Korthax asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected the answer. We lost, Zexandra replied simply. But instead of destroying us, the humans rebuilt our damaged ships and offered us a choice: continue raiding and face the consequences, or learn to create value instead of stealing it. And you chose to submit? I chose to grow, Zexandra corrected. The technology they shared allowed my people to transform asteroids into garden worlds, to synthesize any resource we needed, to explore parts of the galaxy we never could have reached through conquest alone. But at what cost? Admiral Gextar demanded. What did you have to give up? Our limitations, Zexandra replied. Our fear. Our assumption that the universe was a hostile place where only the strong survive. We discovered that the universe is actually abundant beyond imagination once you stop fighting it. Your people are still Krillian? More Krillian than ever, Zexandra said with obvious pride. We've become the best version of ourselves. Our strength is used to build rather than destroy. Our intelligence explores and creates instead of plotting conquest. Our determination drives us to solve problems that benefit everyone rather than accumulating power over others. Fleet Admiral Korthax absorbed this information in silence. Around him, his senior commanders waited for the decision that would reshape their civilization. Secretary General Chun, he finally said, if we accept your offer, what happens to our people in the conquered worlds? They're given the same choice you're being given, Chen replied. Those who want to help repair the damage they've caused and build something better are welcomed as partners. Those who can't let go of domination are relocated to realities where their choices don't harm others. And the conquered species? They decide their own fates, Chen said. Some will choose independence. Others might invite Dominion settlers to remain as equals rather than rulers. A few might even ask for help in rebuilding what was destroyed. Why would they want us to stay after everything we've done to them? Because wisdom recognizes that former enemies can become the most valuable allies, Chen explained. A species that has learned from its mistakes often has unique insights to offer those still struggling with the same problems. Commander Zeth Kar stepped forward. Admiral, I've been thinking about something Secretary General Chen said earlier. She mentioned that humanity has been trying to warn us for 50 years. But we interpreted every peaceful contact as weakness, every gift as a trap, every offer of friendship as a strategy for conquest. What are you suggesting? Korthax asked. That maybe the warnings were clear all along, Zethkar replied. Maybe we've been so focused on taking things from others that we couldn't recognize when someone was trying to give us something valuable. The warnings were that continued aggression would eventually meet unstoppable opposition, Admiral Vexton added. But there were also warnings that a better path was available if we chose to take it. Fleet Admiral Korthax looked around at his assembled commanders, then at the impossible display of Allied vessels surrounding their fleets. Finally, he turned back to Secretary General Chun. "If I give the order for all Dominion forces to stand down and accept your terms," he said slowly, "what happens next?" "We begin the work of healing," Chun replied. "We help you understand how to repair the damage that's been done. We teach you how to transform your strength into a force for creation rather than destruction. And we welcome you as partners in building a universe where every species can reach its full potential. And if some of my people refuse, then they get their own universe where they can continue being what they've always been," Chun said. "The choice belongs to each individual. We don't force anyone to change. We just make sure their choices don't harm others." Korthax took a deep breath and keyed the fleet-wide communication system. "All Dominion forces, this is Fleet Admiral Korthax. Stand down all weapons systems and prepare for cooperation protocols. We are accepting the human terms." The response was immediate. Some ships powered down their weapons and shields without question. Others hesitated, then complied. A few refused outright and found themselves gently relocated to parallel dimensions where they could continue their expansion without affecting anyone else. "Welcome to the cooperative," Secretary General Chun said as the last weapons powered down. "The real adventure is just beginning." As Commander Zethkar watched through the viewports, the impossible fleet of Allied vessels began rearranging itself into new formations. But instead of battle groups, they were forming work teams, ships designed for construction, healing, exploration, and creation. The age of Dominion conquest was over. The age of cooperative growth was about to begin. And in the distance, Earth continued its peaceful rotation, a small blue world that had just changed the destiny of an entire galaxy through the simple act of refusing to let warnings go unheeded.